The morning sky over Seoul turned dark as massive shadows blocked out the sun, and President Dae-ho Kim knew that everything had changed forever when he looked up at the enormous alien ships hovering silently above every major city on Earth. Their hulls stretching for kilometers and reflecting no light as if they absorbed all hope from the world below. General Bo-ram Park burst into the emergency meeting room where world leaders had gathered through video screens, her face pale as she delivered the news that their entire global defense network had been disabled in less than 3 minutes without a single shot being fired, and the alien ships had appeared simultaneously over New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, and 50 other cities with such precision that it seemed impossible. Dr. Mi-young Choi watched the readings on her scientific equipment with growing horror as she realized these ships were not just large, but were actually bending space around them, creating gravitational fields that should have torn Earth apart, but somehow remained perfectly controlled. And she whispered to her colleague that humanity was facing technology so advanced that their physics textbooks might as well be children's drawings. The first communication came exactly 1 hour after the ships arrived, when every screen on Earth flickered to life, showing a creature that stood 3 meters tall with 4 arms, crystalline skin that shifted colors like oil on water, and eyes that seemed to hold the cold intelligence of a being who had done this many times before. And when it spoke, its voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Supreme Commander Thylex of the Vorthak Empire looked directly into the cameras, as if he could see through them into the souls of every human watching, and declared that Earth had been selected for integration into their empire, that resistance was not just futile, but would result in the complete extinction of the human species, and that they had conquered 847 worlds before this one, without ever facing meaningful opposition. Chancellor Hyun-woo Lee of the European Federation immediately began drafting surrender documents, while President Dae-ho Kim tried desperately to contact other world leaders. But military strategist Tai Min-song quietly pulled Bo-ram Park aside and whispered that something felt wrong about this whole situation, because no empire that powerful would need to make threats if they could simply take what they wanted. The demonstration of alien power came without warning when Mars Colony Beta, home to 50,000 brave pioneers who had spent their lives building humanity's first foothold beyond Earth, simply ceased to exist in a flash of light that lasted less than a second. And the silence that followed was broken only by the sound of grown leaders weeping as they realized they were completely helpless. Mi-young Choi ran calculations through the night and discovered that the energy required to destroy Mars Colony Beta would have been enough to power Earth's entire civilization for 1,000 years. Yet the aliens had used it as casually as someone might swat a fly, and she began to suspect that humanity was about to face something far beyond their worst nightmares. Tai Min-song gathered a small group of military officers and scientists in a hidden bunker beneath Seoul where they could speak freely without alien surveillance, and he shared his theory that the Vorthak were following some kind of pattern or protocol, almost like they were following a manual for conquering primitive civilizations, which meant there might be weaknesses they could exploit if they were clever enough. The alien ultimatum was simple and brutal. Humanity had 72 hours to surrender unconditionally, accept integration into the Vorthak Empire, and prepare for the selection process where the most capable humans would be transported off-world to serve the Empire, while the rest would remain on Earth as a managed population under alien oversight. Bo-ram Park reviewed every piece of military intelligence they had gathered and realized that Earth's weapons were not just inadequate, but completely irrelevant against alien technology that could manipulate matter at the quantum level, create energy, shields that deflected nuclear weapons, and move faster than light across impossible distances without any visible propulsion systems. President Dae-ho Kim found himself caught between world leaders who demanded immediate surrender to save their populations, and a small group of advisors who insisted that surrender would only delay humanity's extinction. And as the hours passed, he began to understand that he was making a decision that would determine whether humans would survive as a species or fade into history as footnotes in some alien database. Mi-young Choi made a disturbing discovery when she analyzed the energy signatures from the alien ships and realized they were not just advanced, but were operating on principles that violated several fundamental laws of physics, which suggested that the Vorthak had either discovered something humanity had never imagined, or they represented a form of evolution so far beyond human understanding that communication itself might be impossible. The streets of every major city emptied as people huddled in their homes watching news broadcasts that showed the same terrible images over and over. The alien ships hanging motionless in the sky like dark angels of judgment. The empty space where Mars Colony Beta had existed just days before. And the faces of world leaders who looked like condemned prisoners waiting for their execution. Taemin. Song spent sleepless hours studying every historical example of resistance against overwhelming odds, and came to the uncomfortable conclusion that humanity's only hope lay not in military strength or technological advancement, but in something far more unpredictable. The peculiar human tendency to adapt and evolve when faced with extinction, though he had no idea how that might help. Against beings who could erase entire worlds with a thought as the 72-hour deadline approached, Chancellor Hyunwoo Lee and most other world leaders prepared to broadcast humanity's surrender to the waiting alien fleet, while President Dae-ho Kim struggled with the knowledge that he was about to condemn his entire species to slavery or death. And somewhere in the darkness between hope and despair, the future of humanity hung by a thread thinner than spider silk. The final hours before the deadline passed in a blur of desperate diplomacy and failed military preparations as Earth's greatest. Minds worked frantically to find some weakness in alien technology that seemed as perfect and invulnerable as the laws of mathematics themselves. And when the time came, President Dae-ho Kim stood before the cameras knowing that his next words would either save his species or mark the beginning of the end of human civilization, as they had always known it. President Dae-ho Kim stood before the cameras with tears streaming down his face as he spoke the words that would echo through history and announced humanity's unconditional surrender to the Vorthak Empire, knowing that he had just traded his people's freedom for the slim hope that some humans might survive whatever came next. While across the globe billions of people watched in stunned silence as their leaders formally ended human independence, Forever Governor Zephyros materialized in the United Nations building within hours of the surrender, his towering crystalline form moving through the halls with the casual confidence of someone who had performed this same ritual of conquest hundreds of times before, and he immediately began implementing the standard Vorthak integration protocols that had proven successful on 847 previous worlds, without any meaningful resistance or complications. The neural compliance implants were installed first in all government leaders and military commanders, small crystalline devices that attached to the base of the skull and monitored thoughts while suppressing any impulses toward rebellion or resistance. And President Dae-ho Kim felt his anger and fear drain away like water from a broken cup as the alien technology began rewriting his neural pathways to ensure complete obedience to Vorthak authority. Ma Young-choi watched in horror from her hidden laboratory as her colleagues and friends returned from their mandatory implant procedures. With blank expressions and mechanical movements, their personalities seemingly intact but their spark of defiance completely extinguished. And she realized that the aliens were not just conquering human bodies, but were systematically destroying the human spirit itself. The resource extraction facilities appeared overnight in strategic locations around the globe. Massive structures that seemed to grow from the Earth itself as alien technology reshaped matter at the molecular level, and within days they were strip mining entire mountain ranges while processing atmospheric gases and ocean water with an efficiency that made human industrial capabilities look like children playing with toys. Young engineer Jin I-han tried to understand how the alien machinery worked by studying the extraction facilities near her home in Busan. But every time she got close enough to see the detailed mechanisms, the devices seemed to shift and change as if they were aware of her presence, and she began to suspect that Vorthak technology was not just advanced, but was actually alive in some incomprehensible way. The selection process began in the third week of occupation, when Vorthak assessment teams arrived in every major population center to identify humans with useful skills or genetic markers. And Jin A-han found herself standing in a long line with her younger brother Woo Jin-han, while alien scanners examined their bodies and minds with intrusive beams of light that seemed to peer directly into their souls. Woo Jin-han had always been gifted with computers and mathematics, but the alien scanners detected something more in his neural patterns. Some unusual configuration of synapses that made the Vorthak assessment team pause and mark him for immediate off-world transportation, and Jin-A Han felt her heart break as she realized she would probably never see her brother again. The transport ships arrived like clockwork every week to collect the selected humans, and families across Earth watched helplessly as their brightest children and most capable adults were herded into alien vessels that departed for unknown destinations, while Governor Zephyros assured the remaining population that the selected were being given the honor of serving the greater Vorthak civilization. Underground resistance leader Yoonji Nam organized secret meetings in abandoned subway tunnels beneath Seoul, where small groups of humans gathered to share information and plan desperate acts of defiance. But every attempt at sabotage failed, as if the aliens could predict their movements. And gradually, the resistance began to suspect that the Vorthak had access to human thoughts in ways that made conventional rebellion impossible. Former programmer Seok Jin-yoon discovered that his neural implant was not working properly when he found himself able to access restricted computer networks that should have been completely blocked, and he began experimenting with the alien control systems while pretending to be a compliant citizen, slowly learning to navigate Vorthak databases and communication channels without triggering their security protocols. The first breakthrough came when Seok Jin-yoon managed to hack into a Vorthak supply inventory system and discovered that the aliens were harvesting far more resources from Earth than they needed for their stated purposes, which suggested they were either extremely wasteful or were preparing for some massive project that required enormous amounts of raw materials. Jin-A Han noticed strange changes in her own thinking patterns after her brother was taken away, finding that she could understand alien technology with an intuitive clarity that should have been impossible. And when she touched one of the extraction machines, it responded to her presence in ways that seemed almost eager, as if it wanted to share its secrets with her. Governor Zephyros received regular reports from his assessment teams about minor anomalies in human behavior, but he dismissed these irregularities as typical adjustment problems that always occurred during the early phases of planetary integration, and he assured the Vorthak High Command that Earth would be fully pacified within the standard time frame of 1 Earth year. The anomalies began to multiply as more humans reported unusual experiences with alien technology, and Yoonji Nam started documenting these incidents while trying to find patterns that might explain why some humans seemed to be developing strange new abilities, while others remained completely normal. Though she was careful to keep her research hidden from the ever-watchful alien surveillance systems, Seok Jin-yoon made contact with other hackers around the world and discovered that the neural implants were not just malfunctioning randomly, but were actually being overwhelmed by human brain activity that operated on frequencies the Vorthak had never encountered. And he began to wonder if humanity possessed some unique neurological characteristic that the aliens had failed to account for in their conquest calculations. Dr. Mi-young Choi emerged from her hidden laboratory after months of research and sought out Yoonji Nam to share her incredible discovery that human DNA contained dormant genetic sequences that seemed to be activating in response to exposure to Vorthak neural interface technology, though she had no idea what these sequences were designed to do or why they existed. The resistance meetings grew larger as word spread about humans who could interface with alien computers, manipulate energy fields, and perceive information that should have been impossible to detect. And Yoonji Nam began to organize these gifted individuals into small cells that could work together to explore their developing abilities while staying hidden from Vorthak surveillance. Jin-A Han received a secret message from her brother Woo Jin. Han transmitted through a hijacked alien communication channel, and his words filled her with both hope and terror as he described the slave colonies where humans were forced to work on massive construction projects that seemed to be building something that would reshape the entire galaxy. Governor Zephyros finally began to take the anomaly reports seriously when his security teams reported that several Vorthak facilities had been infiltrated by humans who seemed to walk through solid walls and manipulate alien technology with their bare hands. But he still believed these problems could be solved with increased surveillance and more efficient neural implants. The Resistance planned their first major operation using information gathered by their growing network of enhanced humans, targeting a Vorthak transport hub, where they hoped to rescue some of the selected humans and gather intelligence about the alien empire's true intentions, though none of them suspected that this mission would mark the beginning of something that would shake the foundations of the entire galaxy. Dr. Sun Ho Kang worked through another sleepless night in his hidden laboratory, analyzing blood samples from humans who had developed strange abilities. And his discovery sent chills down his spine as he realized that human DNA was not just changing, but was actively rewriting itself using genetic sequences that appeared to be millions of years old, as if some ancient programming was finally being activated after lying dormant throughout all of human history. Resistance fighter Heiwan Zhang pressed her palm against the alien control panel and felt the machine respond to her touch like a loyal pet, its crystalline surface warming under her hand as information flowed directly into her mind. And she suddenly understood how to operate technology that should have taken years of study to comprehend. Though the experience left her exhausted and confused about what was happening to her body, Yunjinam gathered the enhanced humans in an abandoned shopping mall beneath the city, where alien surveillance was weakest, and she watched in amazement as Kyungsu Baek demonstrated his ability to see through solid walls while Heiwan Zhang interfaced with a captured Vorthak datapad, their abilities growing stronger each day as if they were evolving at an impossible rate. The first coordinated resistance operation began when Seok Jin Yoon used his hacking skills to disable security systems at a major transport facility while Heiwan Zhang walked through the walls to reach the holding cells where hundreds of selected humans waited for transport to off-world slave colonies. And what they found inside changed everything. They thought they knew about the Vorthak occupation. Wu Jinhan stood among the prisoners with his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness, and when Jin Han reached through the bars to touch her brother's hand, she felt an electric shock of recognition as she realized he had developed abilities far beyond anything they had seen before. His mind somehow expanded to process information at superhuman speeds, while maintaining perfect clarity and focus. Dr. Sun Ho Kang analyzed genetic samples from the rescued prisoners and made a discovery that challenged everything humanity believed about their own origins when he found that the dormant sequences in human DNA were not random mutations, but appeared to be carefully engineered code left behind by an unknown civilization, as if humans had been designed for this moment. The Vorthak science officer Nexus 7 submitted increasingly urgent reports to the High Command describing human capabilities that violated known biological laws, but the response from the Empire remained dismissive because no conquered species in their 847 previous campaigns had ever developed anything resembling these anomalous traits. Heiwan Zhang discovered she could do more than just interface with alien technology when she accidentally walked through a solid steel door while fleeing from Vorthak security forces. And the experience terrified her because she could feel her molecular structure shifting and reforming in ways that should have killed her instantly, yet she emerged completely unharmed on the other side. Young resistance member Dong Hyun exhibited the most dramatic abilities when he began manipulating gravitational fields around himself, making objects float through the air or crushing alien weapons with focused pressure waves, and his power grew stronger each time he used it, as if the universe itself was teaching him how to bend the fundamental forces of reality. The rescue mission at the transport facility turned into something unprecedented when the enhanced humans worked together to not just free the prisoners, but to actually capture an entire Vorthak battlecruiser, with Seok Jin Yoon taking control of the ship's computer systems, while Heiwan Zhang interfaced directly with the navigation controls to pilot the massive vessel away from Earth. Governor Zephyros finally understood the magnitude of the crisis when he watched security footage of humans walking through walls, manipulating gravity, and interfacing with technology that required years of training for Vorthak officers to operate. And he immediately requested reinforcements from the Empire while implementing emergency containment protocols that had never been needed before. The captured battlecruiser became a mobile base for the Resistance as they traveled through the solar system, rescuing human prisoners from mining stations and research facilities. And with each successful mission, they recruited more enhanced humans whose abilities seemed to complement each other in ways that suggested some kind of planned design. Jinny Han found herself able to understand and repair alien technology at the molecular level, her hands somehow knowing exactly which components to adjust even when working with devices she had never seen before. And she began to suspect that human consciousness was interfacing with the quantum structure of matter itself in ways that Vorthak science could not explain. Nexus 7 conducted desperate experiments trying to understand how humans could violate fundamental physical laws, but every test produced results that contradicted centuries of established Vorthak science. and he began to worry that his empire had encountered something far beyond their experience or ability to control. The enhanced humans discovered they could communicate with each other telepathically across vast distances when Kyung-Soo Baek made mental contact with resistance cells on Earth while orbiting Jupiter, sharing information and coordinating operations through some kind of quantum entanglement that connected their expanded consciousness. Sunho Kang decoded more of the ancient genetic sequences and realized they contained instructions for abilities that seemed designed specifically to counter the methods used by technologically advanced civilizations to conquer primitive worlds, as if some long-dead race had anticipated this exact scenario and programmed humans with the tools they would need to survive and fight back. The Vorthak High Command finally sent Admiral Korath with a fleet of 200 warships to eliminate the human anomaly before it could spread to other conquered worlds, but they had no idea that their standard military tactics would prove completely useless against beings who could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe with their minds. Hei Wan-Jiang experienced a breakthrough when she learned to phase, not just through solid matter but through space itself, allowing her to appear instantly at distant locations without traveling through the intervening distance, and she realized that her consciousness was no longer completely bound by the physical limitations that governed normal matter. The resistance network expanded across Earth as more humans underwent the awakening and developed unique abilities that seemed tailored to their individual personalities and needs, creating a diverse collection of enhanced beings who could work together to challenge an empire that had never faced meaningful opposition. Dong-hyun Oh led a daring raid on a Vorthak command center, using his gravity manipulation abilities to disable their weapons, while Seok-jin-yoon hacked their communication systems to broadcast resistance messages across the entire galaxy, informing other conquered species that the impossible was happening on a small blue world at the edge of the Vorthak Empire. The implications of human evolution began to sink in when Jin Ahan realized that her abilities were not just growing stronger but were actually rewriting the laws of physics around her, suggesting that consciousness itself might be a fundamental force in the universe that the Vorthak had never learned to harness or understand. Young Mi Shin discovered her telepathic abilities had expanded beyond Earth when she made contact with human slaves working in the mining colonies of Kepler 442b, and her mind bridged the impossible distance between star systems as if space itself was just another barrier to be overcome, allowing her to coordinate resistance activities across 12 different worlds where humans had been scattered throughout the Vorthak Empire. The rebellion spread like wildfire through the galaxy as enslaved. Humans on distant worlds received young Mi Shin's telepathic messages and began manifesting their own enhanced abilities, and Admiral Korath watched in growing horror as his intelligence reports described simultaneous uprisings on planets that should have had no way to communicate with each other. Gi Tai Park stood in the ruins of a Vorthak military base and reached out with his mind to manipulate the gravitational fields around enemy ships, crushing their hulls like empty cans while redirecting their weapons' fire back at their own forces. And he realized that his consciousness had somehow learned to interact with the fundamental forces that held the universe together. The liberation of other species began when So Young Kim phased through the walls of a Vorthak prison ship and found herself face to face with captured chronic warriors whose brutal strength had been legendary throughout the galaxy until they were conquered and enslaved, and when she freed them from their energy shackles, they pledged their lives to the human cause with fierce loyalty. Changmin Li processed information at quantum speeds as he interfaced with captured Vorthak databases and discovered the locations of prison colonies holding enslaved Etherians, Mallory, and dozens of other conquered species who had been broken by centuries of servitude. And he began coordinating rescue missions that would reshape the balance of power across the entire galaxy. Admiral Korath brought his fleet of 200 warships to Earth, expecting to face a primitive rebellion that could be crushed with overwhelming firepower. But instead he found a planet defended by beings who could manipulate reality itself, and his first attack wave was completely destroyed when Jaehoon Ryu interfaced with spacetime to turn Earth's defensive grid into a reality-warping fortress. The Vorthak Science Division worked frantically to understand how humans could violate the laws of physics, but every theory they developed was immediately disproven by new displays of impossible abilities. and Nexus 7 began to suspect that his empire had encountered something that represented an entirely different form of evolution. Freed chronic warriors fought alongside enhanced humans in battles that spanned multiple star systems, their natural aggression amplified by human strategic thinking and technological mastery, while liberated Etherians used their psychic abilities to coordinate massive fleets across impossible distances, and shape-shifting Malari infiltrated Vorthak command centers to gather intelligence and sabotage critical systems. Jinehan learned to interface not just with individual machines but with entire technological networks spanning multiple worlds, and she began rewriting the programming of Vorthak control systems to free enslaved populations while simultaneously turning their own weapons against them in a galaxy-spanning act of technological rebellion. The Vorthak Empire faced something unprecedented in their history, when their conquered worlds began fighting back with abilities that seemed to grow stronger, rather than weaker over time, and High Command realized they were not dealing with a typical rebellion, but with an evolutionary leap that threatened the very foundations of their civilization. Young Mi Xin established telepathic networks connecting resistance cells across hundreds of worlds, creating a communication system that operated faster than light and could not be intercepted or blocked by Vorthak technology. And through these connections, she discovered that humans were not the only species capable of evolution when pushed to the brink of extinction. The battle for the Vega system became a turning point when Gite Park used his gravitational manipulation abilities to redirect an entire asteroid field, turning it into a weapon that destroyed a Vorthak battle fleet while simultaneously creating a new orbital pattern that would support life on previously barren worlds. So Young Kim led rescue missions to the deepest prison colonies where the Vorthak kept their most dangerous captives, and she discovered ancient beings whose knowledge of the universe far exceeded even Vorthak science, including survivors of the mysterious race that had originally programmed human DNA with its evolutionary potential. Chang Min Li processed vast amounts of captured intelligence and realized that the Vorthak Empire was not as monolithic as it appeared, with several subject species beginning to question their loyalty as news of human victories spread throughout their territory, and he began broadcasting messages designed to encourage defection and internal rebellion. Admiral Korath watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by enemies who seemed to bend reality around themselves like a weapon, and he finally understood that the Vorthak were not facing rebels but had accidentally triggered the emergence of beings who operated on a completely different level of existence. The liberation of enslaved species accelerated as enhanced humans developed new abilities that seemed specifically designed to counter Vorthak control methods, with Heiwan Zhang learning to phase entire buildings out of normal space, Dong Hyun Oh creating gravitational anomalies that could trap enemy fleets, and Seok Jin-yoon developing the ability to interface with living minds as easily as computer systems. Jae-hoon Ryu experienced a breakthrough that terrified even his allies when he learned to manipulate the quantum foam underlying reality itself, essentially editing the universe at its most fundamental level. And his first experiment accidentally created a pocket dimension where time moved differently, giving the Resistance a hidden base that existed outside normal space-time. The Vorthak. High Command convened an emergency session as reports flooded in from across their empire, describing the collapse of their control systems, the defection of subject species, and the emergence of human-led coalitions that seemed to grow stronger with every victory. And for the first time in their species' history, they began to consider the possibility that their empire might actually fall. Young Mi Xin made contact with resistance movements on planets that had been conquered centuries before humans even developed agriculture, and she discovered that the enhanced abilities spreading through enslaved populations were not random mutations, but were part of an ancient design that had been waiting for the right catalyst to activate. The revolution reached a critical mass when liberated species began working together under human coordination to attack Vorthak's strongholds throughout the galaxy, using combinations of abilities that no single species could achieve alone. And the empire that had seemed invincible just months before began collapsing under the weight of its own conquered populations as Earth's defensive capabilities grew, stronger under Jae-hoon Ryu's reality manipulation. The planet became a beacon of hope for oppressed beings throughout the galaxy, and Admiral Korath realized that he was not just fighting a war, but was witnessing the birth of a new form of galactic civilization that would make his empire's methods of conquest completely obsolete. Supreme Commander Thylex arrived at Earth with the largest battle fleet in Vorthak history. 3,000 warships carrying planet-killing weapons that had never failed to destroy rebellious worlds, but he found himself facing something that challenged everything his species understood about power and conquest when Insu Choi stepped forward to meet him in the space between worlds. His consciousness expanded to encompass dimensions that Vorthak science had never imagined. The final battle began not with weapons or ships, but with a clash of fundamental forces as Insu Choi reached out with his mind to touch the quantum structure of reality itself. And Thylex felt the universe bend around the human-like clay in the hands of a master sculptor, rewriting the laws of physics in ways that made his most advanced technology seem as primitive as stone tools. Su Jinyang coordinated fleets that moved through folded space, arriving at battles before they began and departing after they ended in the same instant, while her consciousness navigated the maze of parallel dimensions that existed alongside normal reality. And she realized that human evolution had unlocked access to the true structure of the universe that existed beyond the limited perceptions of most species. Minho Lim discovered he could manipulate time itself when he began coordinating attacks across multiple timelines simultaneously, creating paradoxes that confused Vorthak defenders while ensuring that every human victory was predetermined by careful manipulation of causality. And his abilities grew stronger as he learned to think in terms of probability waves rather than linear sequences. The galaxy watched in astonishment as the mighty Vorthak Empire crumbled under an assault that operated on principles no military commander had ever encountered. With human-led coalitions appearing simultaneously in star systems separated by thousands of light years, their attacks coordinated through methods that transcended normal space and time. Jihye Quan emerged as Earth's first galactic ambassador when she made contact with neutral species throughout the galaxy, and explained that humanity was not seeking to replace the Vorthak Empire with another system of conquest, but was instead offering something unprecedented: a galactic community, based on mutual evolution and cooperative growth rather than domination. The revelation of humanity's true nature came when Dr. Sun Ho Kang finally decoded the complete genetic sequence hidden in human DNA and discovered that humans were the descendants of an ancient race called the Architects who had seeded life throughout the galaxy millions of years ago, leaving behind genetic triggers that would activate when their descendants encountered advanced civilizations that threatened their development. Young Mi Xin established telepathic contact with the few surviving architects living in hidden enclaves at the galaxy's edge, and they confirmed that humanity's awakening was not accidental, but was part of a carefully planned response to civilizations like the Vorthak, who used conquest and slavery to maintain their power, making humans natural liberators and uplifters. Of other species, Thylex made his final desperate gambit when he attempted to destroy Earth with a weapon that could shatter planets by disrupting their molecular bonds. But Insu Choi simply reached out with his enhanced consciousness and turned the destructive energy into creative force, using it to terraform barren worlds and create new habitable systems throughout the galaxy. The transformation of galactic civilization accelerated as liberated species began developing their own enhanced abilities under human guidance, and the very concept of conquest became obsolete when any attempt at domination triggered evolutionary responses that made the oppressed stronger than their oppressors. Gite Park learned to create stable wormholes that connected distant star systems, making interstellar travel as easy as walking through a door, while So Young Kim developed the ability to phase entire planets out of normal space to protect them from hostile forces, and Changmin Li began processing the collective knowledge of thousands of species to solve problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. The Vorthak High Command faced the complete collapse of their empire when their remaining subject species began evolving enhanced abilities that made resistance not just possible but inevitable, and they realized that their methods of conquest had accidentally triggered a galaxy-wide evolutionary leap that would reshape all future civilization. Jae-hoon Ryu pushed his reality manipulation abilities to their ultimate limit when he learned to edit the fundamental constants that governed physics across entire star systems, creating zones where faster-than-light travel was possible, where matter could be transformed into energy at will. and where consciousness itself became a measurable force that could reshape the universe, the new galactic community that emerged. From the ruins of the Vorthak Empire, operated on principles that seemed impossible to traditional military minds, with conflicts resolved through evolutionary challenges rather than warfare, problems solved through collective consciousness rather than individual competition, and progress measured by the growth and development of all species rather than the dominance of a few. Admiral Korath surrendered his remaining fleet when he realized that continuing to fight would only trigger more evolutionary responses in his enemies, and he became one of the first Vorthak to undergo the transformation process that allowed former conquerors to join the growing galactic community as equals rather than rulers. The ripple effects of humanity's awakening spread beyond their home galaxy when Minho Lim made contact with similar civilizations in distant galactic clusters, and he discovered that the architects had seeded life throughout the universe with the same genetic triggers, creating a vast network of species capable of transcending the cycle of conquest and oppression that had dominated galactic history. Insu Choi found himself able to perceive the universe as a living entity with its own consciousness and purpose, and he realized that the evolution of intelligent life was not random, but was part of a cosmic design that used conflict and challenge to drive growth and development on scales that individual species could barely comprehend. The final transformation came when Jihi Quan established the Galactic Council of Evolved Species, with representatives from thousands of worlds, creating a government based on cooperative evolution rather than competitive dominance. And the first law they passed declared that any species attempting conquest would automatically trigger protective evolution in their intended victims. Young Mu. Shin's telepathic networks evolved into something far beyond simple communication when they began facilitating the sharing of consciousness itself, allowing beings from different species to literally experience existence from other perspectives and develop empathy and understanding that made conflict nearly impossible. The galaxy settled into a new era of unprecedented peace and growth as species that had been enemies for millennia learned to work together on projects that benefited everyone, terraforming dead worlds, creating new forms of life and exploring the deeper mysteries of existence that had been hidden behind the violence of constant warfare. As news of the transformation spread to other galaxies, advanced civilizations across the universe began to whisper about the small blue world whose children had evolved beyond any cage built to contain them. And some began to wonder if they were witnessing the birth of something that would reshape the fundamental nature of consciousness and existence itself throughout all of creation.